Stephen Silver from Crit is joining us. Please let us know who you're with in the chat room, where you're tuning in from, whether it's San Antonio or elsewhere, nationally or internationally. Javier, Janet, thank you for joining in. David, Angulo, our Board of Trustees Chair Peggy Pace, Troy Resendez, Jimena, our intern from the ambassador program with the city that Sherry introduced us to. So Jimena, it's her third day on the job. So thank you for tuning in. Thomas Corser. Who else? Javier Roman. Thank you for sharing your email. You're welcome to promote your business or organization and your contact. If you need us to follow up or partner with us, we're always looking to collaborate. So don't be shy. Or if you just want to have a beverage with us, let's say at a French restaurant or have a dinner, and we'll get started soon. For those watching on our YouTube channel, thank you for tuning in, which will also be copied and pasted on our Facebook page. So if you have any comments or questions, please put them there, and also use the Q&A function at the bottom to ask any questions. And we'll start here in about 1 minute. All right. Andrea Garcia, one of our new board members. Danny Khalil, thank you. I think I'm not taking attendance, Danny, but I think this is your third straight program with us. Beth Costello, thank you for joining in. It's been a while, Beth. Good to see you here. Funny, Javier. Language solutions. Oh, very good. Thank you for that, Javier. Well, we want to welcome you to our virtual programming, a very special one. You know, we're always looking for guest speakers and programs that include people outside of San Antonio, because we bring the world to San Antonio and take San Antonio to the world. But we have a wealth of information and a great group of people who are right here in San Antonio, who are living and breathing international relations. I know all of the people you're about to meet today well, and they are experts in their field, and they're very kind people. They know their stuff, and they're willing to make time for the World Affairs Council and also to share their experiences and their expertise with all of you. And thank you for joining in. We can't do what we do without your support. If you're a member, thank you. If you'd like to become a member, please find out. The link will be in the chat room. We always appreciate any type of gift that is important to you, to the council, in order for us to continue our wonderful programming. So please make a gift that is significant to you. We are also starting in-person programming starting in July. Keep looking at your emails, because we will have information about in-person programming. The first one will only be for members. So if you're not a member, it's time to sign up now, and there'll be plenty of opportunities and messages as we get closer to July. We also have a special book club program next week on border crossings. So stay tuned for that. I want to now introduce you to our wonderful moderator, a World Affairs Council board member as well. Shahzad Sherry Dohlat Shahi is the Chief Diplomacy and Protocol Officer, heading the City of San Antonio's Global Engagement Office. She wears so many different hats, does so many different things, but she specifically advises and assists and supports elected officials, including the mayor and city council and executives, on matters of international affairs, public diplomacy, public diplomatic procedure and protocol. You can find her extended bio in the chat room. And we also want to thank the City of San Antonio Global Engagement Office and Passport San Antonio for supporting and sponsoring this program. So thank you to them. And now I want to introduce you to Sherry Dohlat Shahi to take it from here. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Armin. Thanks for the introduction. And of course, I'm very proud to be on the board of the World Affairs Council. I think the work that this organization does is so important for our community. I'm a big believer in that we have to take San Antonio out into the world, and we have to bring the world into San Antonio. So that's complete alignment, what the work that the World Affairs Council does with my day-to-day work. We're here today because of the hard work of the staff of the World Affairs Council. So thank you, Armin, thank you, Sam, thank you to all your interns, everyone who works in your office, to the wonderful board and my board colleagues who give so much of their time to make sure this organization thrives and moves forward, currently under the leadership of Peggy Pace. Thank you, Peggy. And of course, we are joined today by a wonderful, absolutely wonderful group of people who we refer to as the Honorary Consuls, the Honorary Consuls in San Antonio, representing specific countries. Now, before I go into introducing them, I do want to kind of give a little explanation. Of course, San Antonio is part of the Texas Triangle, is one of 4 important cities in terms of population size and in Texas. But where we see the largest number of consular representations in the state is in Houston. Houston, the city of Houston, is home to more than 90 countries that are represented there. So it has currently, I believe that they're kind of went up in rank. They're the 3rd largest, they have the 3rd largest consular corps in the United States today. So that's huge. And of course, our office, the Global Engagement Office, works closely with many of the representatives of different countries based in Houston. There are other consulates that have opted to be elsewhere. For instance, the Consulate of Canada is based in Dallas, and the Consulate of Ireland is based in Austin, up the road. Here in San Antonio, of course, we have the Consulate of Mexico, which handles the affairs not only for San Antonio, but for parts of South Central Texas. So they have a large jurisdiction. Now, our Honorary Consul Corps is not a large one. We certainly are not at the size of Houston, but it's a very powerful, very mighty group of individuals who I would say are prominent members of our community. They are well known. They spend a lot of time giving public service, and they were chosen by the countries they represent to do the work that they do. And I will say that for the benefit of everybody, they don't get paid. This is not a paid gig. And they usually have their other jobs going on, their day jobs. So this is really a big honor. And being an honorary consul is very, very special. It really is a distinction and an honor that is bestowed on the individuals who are asked to represent those countries. And one last thing I'd like to say is not everybody who is an honorary consul of a particular country is necessarily originally from that country. So it could be someone who's just got really good business connections or just had really good even kind of relationships that led them to be invited to represent that country. So I just wanted to lay that out there for the benefit of everyone. And so we have with us today, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order of last name here, Mr. Marco Barros, who is the representing Chile as the honorary consul. And he has been honorary consul of Chile for 8 years, since 2013. Again, as Armen said, the bios for all of our honorary consuls are available. They are on the website and they will be posted continuously throughout this session. We then have Mr. Bob Brobeck, and Bob actually was honorary consul of 2 countries for the longest time. For 25 years, he represented Belgium, and he just retired this year after 25 years of service to the Belgian government. And he has been serving as the honorary consul of Namibia since 2013. So that has also been an 8-year representation. Our next honorary consul, we were talking about him being the freshman of the Consular Corps, is Mr. Steve Chiscano. Now, Steve is representing the Consulate of Spain. He is the honorary consul of Spain. He was appointed to this position in 2020, so he has been there 1 year. Then we have the honorary consul of the United Kingdom, Mr. Andrew Morrison, who has been honorary consul for the UK since 2002. So that's almost 20 years he has been in that position, and of course, again, seen a lot of changes while he's been there. And then, of course, we have Mr. Damien Wattel representing France. And he's the honorary consul of France, has been in that position since 2015, so been at the helm representing France in San Antonio for the last 6 years. So now that I've said this, and given these kind of these larger introductions, I'm going to ask them to talk a little bit about what they do, who they are, and tell you a bit about their role. So I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go backwards from where I started. So we'll start with Damien Wattel. Damien, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Damien Wattel, and I've been about 6 years honorary consul, and I was very honored to get asked by the General Consul of Houston at the time through mostly connections. So clearly, connection in the city is an important factor of the job. I'm a chef by day, so I don't spend a whole lot of time at the desk. We call the stove the piano for in the kitchen language. But I really enjoy meeting the international community through the consular events and connecting with my home country through the people of the French community here in San Antonio.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to now invite Andrew Dunn Russell to say a few words.
Yes, hello, everyone. And first of all, thanks to Armen and Sam and Sherry and the rest of the World Affairs Council, including Peggy Pace and the board, who kindly invited us to take part in this today. As Sherry's already given me 2 names, one is Andrew Morrison and the other is Andrew Dunn Russell. I hold 2 passports. My UK passport says Lord Dunn Russell. My US passport says Andrew Morrison. So for consular purposes, I use the Dunn Russell name. And I represent equally a confusing combination of countries. So the United Kingdom actually has 3 countries appearing in the Euros, if you're a soccer fan right now. So Wales won today, and England plays Scotland on the weekend. I've been doing this, as she says, for almost 20 years, and the job has changed dramatically over the years. I think we've seen a lot of different UK governments come and go, so different groups to represent, and they have different priorities. And the Consul General in Houston has their priorities too. So most honorary consuls will have, they'll be the only representative in that state for the UK, and they will have full range of responsibilities in that state, because honorary in Houston are responsibility a little different. And one of them is always going to be a cultural deal, and there I think I have a special interest in Scotland, and I just like to mention that because I act as the US representative for all sorts of different Scottish organizations, mostly cultural heritage organizations, and that's a big part of what I end up doing. So I would encourage you all, when you've finished, or even during this presentation, to toast us all with a glass of Scotch whiskey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yes, you're absolutely right. I didn't even notice that I had used both names. So thank you for clarifying that. And now, Steve Chiscano, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. First, I would also like to say thanks to you, Sherry, and to Armin and Sam, to the World Affairs Council. You guys do you give a tremendous service to our community, and we're all thankful for the way in which you perform and make our city look very, very good at all times. So thank you to all of you for your efforts. My upbringing really started at a young age. My father was a Canary Islander immigrant from Spain. So I feel, although I'm the freshman, I feel like I've been in diplomatic training for 50 years through the efforts of my father. Shortly after his passing, I had the honor of sitting with Ambassador Santiago Cabanas, who is the ambassador of Spain in Washington, D.C., and the privilege of sitting with Ambassador Consul General Julia Olmo, who sits in Houston as the Consul General. And thanks to them, the two of them, and the country of Spain, I get to sit here today and represent the country. And it's a tremendous honor for me personally, and I'm very thankful for that. The role of the Consul General, I think, or the Honorary Consul, is probably different for each one of us. I believe the way I approach it is the ambassador to both ends. In other words, I'm here to remind remind the people of Spain that you have a history here, that you have a footprint here, and you have a very strong and living presence in this country, in particular San Antonio. And then I also have the obligation to remind people here of the tremendous impact and influence and the benefits that come with creating and strengthening touch points between the two great nations. And so I approach my position in spirit. It's a tremendous job. It's a tremendous honor. And I do feel like I'm very humbled to be with this group of honorees. I look forward to following each of your leadership in this position. And thank you, Sherry, for the introduction.
Thank you very much. And now, Bob Braubach, would you like to please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Sherry. Bob Braubach, and let me thank too Armin and Sherry. And I'll point out that we're lucky to have an international protocol officer like Sherry. I was giving a sister city report to the Consular College, and one of the other cities said, we don't have an international protocol officer like you have in San Antonio. I think this separates us from other cities, and it gives us a special presence. But I think my interest in how I got connected in the consular role was while studying at UT Law in Austin. I had a professor who recommended me to study at the University of Brussels, and I went there, got an advanced degree in Belgium, and worked at an international law firm that represented the Belgian government. And I stayed in close contact with the officials when I returned to San Antonio. They needed a representative here. That was 25 years ago. And working with Belgium was a great honor. We developed a lot of important relationships, trade missions, investments. One Belgian investor bought 6 downtown office buildings, so there's a lot of activity. While working with the Belgians, I also connected with Namibia. There was a Namibian who bought a ranch here in Texas. I started visiting Namibia and became acquainted with the Namibian government. And now San Antonio has a sister city agreement in relationship with the city of Windhoek in Namibia, which is important because it gives a very strong relationship between the 2 cities and 2 regions. And there's most of my work recently with Namibia has been assisting travelers, US, Texas travelers going to Namibia. Most of them are going on hunting, conservation trips, and they like going to Africa and continue to travel even during these times. The Dallas Safari Club continues to send many of its members over. So I think that we have a special role, special opportunity here in San Antonio, and it gives us long-term relationships and friendships that are very rewarding. That's the most important part I see of it. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now Marco Barros, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry, and welcome to World Affairs Council. It's a great opportunity to meet all of you and discuss international affairs, and I'm very grateful that we have this organization and a very, very active international relations department for the city, who gets a lot of things done that sometimes you don't get the credit, but we know who's doing all the work. So representing the country of Chile, my focus has always been trade. I have arranged in the past 8 years a lot of visits for former ambassadors of Chile in Washington, D.C., who are now back in Santiago serving the cabinet of President Piñera. So I do work a lot on trade issues and arrange meetings. Some of them are very specific on oil equipment. Some of them want to visit with HEB, some of them with Governor of Texas, some with the Secretary of State. So it's a very interesting focus on trade. I do work very closely with the Consul General in Houston, Jose Luis Briceño, who's a very, very active consul, very young and very active. And then we also work on trade missions with the Ambassador Alfonso Silva in Washington, D.C. So all this really takes a different angle, but my focus has been trade, except the last 2 years. I think we have gone through a lot of, with the pandemic, a lot of changes on visas, immigration, helping people who are stranded. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Actually, we're going to lead into our next question, and maybe Marcos, you can continue. My next question for all of you, and I'd like each one of you to perhaps answer this one, is related to storytelling. You all must have an interesting story, an anecdote that you would like to share from the time you have served as an honorary consul. And if not, you may want to talk about what has been the most fun part of the work that you do and what you've enjoyed the most. So maybe Marco, you could start us off on that.
Yeah, and I'm going to speak very fast on this one because it's one of the things that are really the impact of all of you as honorary consuls, working with U.S. embassies also and working in diplomacy has a huge impact. I want to go back to March of last year, March of 2020. And I got phone calls from several of the doctors and medical groups in Houston talking about U.S. citizens that were stranded in Lima and Cusco and Machu Picchu in March of last year. And that phone call turned into, how can we get those folks? The airport in Lima was closed. The flights for United, American, and all the airlines were canceled. So that turned into a very quick call into the office of several senators, Ted Cruz, John Cornyn, and other folks. And I will tell you, a member of Congress, Will Hurd, was the one that really acted very quick. In 24 hours, we were talking to the State Department on how to get charter flights sponsored by the State Department and get over 2,500 U.S. citizens. Many of them were Texans in the medical field that we really needed back in Texas. So all that very quick. In 5-6 days after those conversations, phones, emails, and phone calls, Will Hurd was able to get airlines and the State Department to sponsor 2 airplanes every day to get all the U.S. Citizens stranded at the Lima airport. And that was probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in the past 8 years. Very rewarding because I haven't met all those folks, but I got to tell you, I got texts and calls, messages from a lot of them, very grateful. A lot of them worked in the medical industry, doctors and nurses in Houston, and also hospitals outside of Austin and Round Rock that I've never met in my life, but they sent me pictures and how grateful they were. So the impact that all of you do in diplomacy carries a lot for the future. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. And Andrew, would you like to give us a little anecdote, perhaps share with us?
I would, and I'm glad you're stressing the positive here, because one of the things that we all do is that we look after, in my case, distressed British nationals when they're around. And so a lot of it is dealing with people who have tragic situations. But I want to tell you something which is a little different, which is really on the cultural side. Every April, as Sherry knows well, we put on a Highland Games in a Scottish festival out in Helotis. And it's a lot of fun. And on the Friday evening, right before the games, we celebrate National Tartan Day, which is April the 6th, with a ceremony at the Alamo, because over 80% of those who died defending the Alamo were of Scottish descent. And so we remember them, and we sing a few songs and make a few speeches. Well, in 2018, when we celebrated our 300th birthday as a city, we thought it'd be fun to throw in a little river parade as well for right before the ceremony at the Alamo. And so we were going to have special guests in the front boat, and then a boat full of bagpipers making a tremendous noise behind us. And I can tell you, got some very strange looks from tourists walking up and down the Riverwalk. But I asked the mayor if he would be interested in joining us for this occasion. And he said, the Mayor Nierenberg said, well, can I wear my kilt then? And well, I had no idea. And I know he had ancestry from all sorts of countries all over the world, and is therefore the perfect person to be the mayor of such an international city. But I had no idea of his connection to Scotland, but it turned out he used to take part in Highland Games events, throwing telephone poles around and that sort of thing. So he was very enthusiastic, and we had a wonderful time. And he wore his kilt, and the only person who didn't wear a kilt was Henry MacLeish, who was a former First Minister of Scotland, who was wearing a dark grey suit, not properly. But it was a lot of fun, and those sorts of cultural occasions, I think, are a big part of what we enjoy. You know, we were able to go after the river parade to the to Mad Dogs on the Riverwalk and have a special sponsored whiskey celebration before going on to deliver speeches, which I don't remember very well at the Alamo. Anyway, that's that sort of thing which I think we enjoy.
Thank you for sharing. Great story. What about you, Bob? Do you have any anecdotes you'd like to share with us?
Well, Sherry, I might remark, you might remember in 2015 when President Geingob from Namibia had visited San Antonio, and he was so impressed with the Alamo. And that was at the time when Mayor Ivy Taylor was in office and did an excellent job in promoting international relationships. And the president was so impressed with the Alamo and with the Riverwalk, he reminded the city of Windhoek, you need to visit. So they came over 2 years later. The mayor of Windhoek came, and I took him to the Riverwalk. He said, we need to do the same development in Africa, and we need to replicate it, and we need to develop it in Windhoek. The problem is Windhoek doesn't have a river or a water. So he said, we'll improvise and we'll do a dry riverbed. And they're still talking about it. So I think my point is that the San Antonio Riverwalk, the #2 tourist attraction in Texas, and the Alamo are international, as well as the Spurs gives us international recognition throughout the world.
Thank you, Bob. And
Yes.
that's really, you're very right on there. Damien, would you like to share an anecdote with us?
Yes, I mean, this one was more on a sad note, but I remember 2015 as well. I was just coming on like maybe a week or two on the Honorary Consul job when this horrible terrorist attack happened at the Bataclan in Paris. And anyway, so as new to the job, we organized with the help of the City Hall and you, Sherry, a little rally by the San Fernando Cathedral. And anyway, as I think it was, we had a lot of support for it, and it was nice to see the San Antonians really rallying between the French community in San Antonio during that event. And I ended up taking a book of signature and phrases to the mayor of the 11th arrondissement 3 weeks later, because I was traveling to Paris at the time. So anyway, we met the mayor of the 11th arrondissement where the Bataclan is located. And anyway, so I was thrown into that situation quickly. Since then, I've enjoyed, tremendously the medals for World War II veterans and meeting all these anciens combattants that fought in Normandy has been a great pleasure for me. I've enjoyed that tremendously, hearing all the stories and making connections with people that fought in France. So these are two facets that I've been involved with that I've tremendously enjoyed.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And Steve, I know you've been there for 1 year, but is there anything you'd be able to share with us from this time?
Sure. I think for me, as a first timer to hear the stories or see how I can help in a certain way, really COVID-19, the pandemic, coming into this position during a pandemic was really an incredible view of the tremendous efforts that this country engaged in to help foreigners in this country manage a new world. Because what people don't understand is you have foreigners in this country, they're allowed to be here for 90 days and you have to leave. But what happens in a pandemic when you can't leave because there's no flights to get you out, and the statutes and the laws don't provide the exceptions? And so it was a tremendous view for me, first time, to see the engagement of the local community, the engagement of the State Department, the engagement of the foreign countries, in this case, the Foreign Ministry of Spain, to manage people's crisis in this country in a tremendous and very graceful way when it was complete chaos. So it wasn't a particular one example, but I saw that happen over and over. And I tell you, I could not have been more impressed with the love and care that were shown to people to try to help them manage a very complicated world we were living in. So for me, it was very impressive to see that from the inside.
Thank you. And actually, you brought us very well to our next segment, because my next question was going to be really in relation to COVID-19 and the change, well, the roles. I mean, you've all had obviously experience changing roles this last year. Perhaps you've been called on more to do certain things, but maybe Marco, you could kind of elaborate a little bit more about what your experience during this COVID-19. I know you told us your anecdote, but is there anything else you wanted to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think one thing I learned is last March was a very difficult month for a lot of the international airlines. But I got to tell you, I had a lot of calls late at night, 11 o'clock, midnight. My phone is always on to help folks. But one of the things that happened, a lot of the airlines were canceling flights. So both American and United, American was flying out of Miami, United out of Houston, direct nonstop to Santiago. And we had to, at the last minute, help a lot of stranded families at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock, to try to make it on a flight that we knew there was space available on a specific flight. So we took advantage of all that, but I have to give credit to both of the airline carriers and the general managers of the stations, because they waive all the fees and they actually just traded the airline tickets like we used to do 15, 20 years ago. So we had a lot of folks that were able to get that help because of the personal relationship that we had with station managers in San Antonio. So we had a lot of great help. Now, I got to tell you, since last March, all this changes weekly. So my advice to folks is that if you're traveling somewhere right now, check with the airlines, the requirements, which vaccination shots and the 72 hours and the tests and all that has changed quite a bit. So it needs to be called the airline, make sure that you meet all the requirements, because at the present time to Santiago, only citizens of Chile with a Chilean passport can get in, or legal residents with a permanent visa. So this has changed because of the pandemic. So 1 month you're doing one thing, the next month you're doing something else. So that's the reality that we're living in right now.
Thank you. And Bob, you had mentioned that a lot of travelers used to go to Namibia from Texas. So what do you tell people who are planning to travel to Namibia now?
What I tell travelers and people that are traveling to Africa today, much like Marco just said, you need to first be very specific with your airlines, but most importantly, you need to make sure each country has different requirements.
Mm-hmm.
South Africa requires a PCR negative COVID test within 3 days of departure. If you don't arrive within 3 days, you're quarantined. And you could be there, the quarantine is 10 days. The quarantines vary country to country. Zimbabwe has a 2-day requirement. In other words, you have to have a negative PCR test and travel within that 2-day time frame of the date that's stamped on your test. You also, Namibia has a 7-day time period. So each country in Africa is different, and you need to be aware of those. You also need to have the CDC passenger disclosure form and make sure that you have the current forms from the CDC that are required for international travel. And I think more travelers now going to Africa are not going through Europe like they used to because of the 10-day quarantine in Frankfurt. If you're in Frankfurt, even a transit passenger is subject to their requirements. If you leave the airport, you're subject to a quarantine. So you have to stay within the airport. And traveling through Frankfurt, which is a very important international travel hub, is become more difficult because most countries in Europe still have travel restrictions and curfews. So I think the travel, really the question is to travel or not to travel. And the answer is yes, you can travel if you prepare properly, if you do the proper testing, and if you make sure that your travel schedule is going to meet the requirements of that particular country that you're going through. And even if you're going through like South Africa 3 days, then over to Zimbabwe, you got 2 days. Your time frame for travel is really 2 days to get there. So I think it's very important that any traveler look carefully at the requirements and the CDC requirements.
Thank you, Bob. And I was just looking at the chat, and I wanted to welcome Andre Sriregar, the Consul General of Indonesia from Houston, who has joined the call today. So welcome, Consul General. Okay, and Andrew, I have a question for you. What happens if somebody comes up to you and says, well, I want to also become an honorary consul? What do I have to do? What does it take for me to be named an honorary consul? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, you don't volunteer for it. Somebody asks you to do this. And I think there are all sorts of qualifications that people would expect to see in an honorary consul. It's really the Canadians who came up with the idea in the first place, because they have a good eye for the dollar, and they know the value of getting something you don't pay for. But the Canadians found that they didn't have a large a diplomatic service, and they wanted to be represented in more places. And this was a wonderful way for them to do it. I think all diplomatic services are used to being told to do more with less every year. My father was a career diplomat, so I certainly heard that there. So that's one of the great benefits of having honorary consuls, is that we don't cost very much, but we give them a presence. But beyond that, I think because we're not career diplomats, we can provide a really honest assessment of what we see in a way that perhaps a career civil servant won't. They may be thinking about their next posting and keeping in with people and so on. But I think there's a tremendous advantage in having someone who, A, has been in the place a long time and plans to stay there. So they put down roots and they know the place a lot better. Professional diplomats, I remember when my father was posted to a country for 2 years, he'd just about be learning the country and its culture and its ways of doing business and making contacts and so on. And he moved out to a different country entirely. So the fact that we're here a long time, I think, is enormously valuable. And then we can represent, as I think was mentioned earlier, we can do this two-way representation. We can give an honest assessment of this country back, and of this city back to the country that appoints us. But equally, we can do it the other way around, and we can present that country to us. So the qualifications really would be: you need to know the area, you need to know and feel an affection for the country appointing you. You don't have to be a native or an expat, but I mean, for instance, the UK has some Rhodes Scholars, former Rhodes Scholars around the country who went to study at Oxford, became familiar with and attached to the country that way. Some sort of relevant skill set helps. Sometimes international lawyers like Bob are appointed. We have someone with an international law practice in Nashville as one of our honorary consuls. Or finance and trade. It depends on what the priorities are. So people who've a history of an involvement in international trade. I used to be an international merchant banker, so I think that was where something that appealed to the country there. And finally, you have to be presentable in some ways. Sort of forgive the shaggy beard now. I didn't have it when I was appointed. That sneaked up on everybody. But obviously, you have to be more of an asset than a liability in the community. So you don't want a long criminal record. And the State Department will find out when they check you out, obviously, if you're not suitable. But you've got to be someone that will be that understands what it is to be a representative, and that's a job that is a 24/7 job. You can't just switch off and start engaging in improper activities on a weekend because you're representing your country all the time. So I find it to be a very rewarding thing to do, and I would recommend people get involved with this sort of thing. And good luck. And maybe some other country will come down and feel they need another representative in San Antonio, and if so, you might be just the person.
Well, I see that Elizabeth Costello, former Director of International Affairs, many of you know her well, she's saying that it's a really good point that you're making about bridging the role of the honorary consuls general and enabling a more frank perspective, and you can be more frank than a career consul. So that I thought is a very good point.
We get asked to Washington to the embassy every year, all the honorary consuls and consuls general, and the ambassador sits around the breakfast table with us all and asks us for our frank opinions on what's going on in our end of the country and how we see U.S. politics. And I think they always say they get a much more interesting perspective from us than they do from the career diplomats.
And very good. And I'd like to encourage our audience, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And if there's time, we'll definitely get to them. So Steve, I have a question for you. Of course, you are a lawyer by profession. I know Bob is a lawyer as well. And so, you know, we talk about honorary consuls having limited immunity under the Vienna Convention. And what does this mean, you know, for the average person who is watching this session? I know that there was a question before about, does this mean you can break the rules, you can speed, or you can park wherever you want? I mean, what does it mean for the honorary consuls when they do have some of this limited immunity?
Well, that piece comes in essentially two parts. The appointment of an honorary consul comes with the appointment from the country. So Spain, for example, would have to say, we want to appoint Steve Chiscano as the honorary consul. That's step number one. And then there's a vetting process that happens through the State Department. And so just because the country gives you the green light, if they're giving the green light to a guy that Andrew was describing, that is, you know, deciding that they're going to act in a way that is not respectful of the position or as a representative of the country, it's a problem. So there's an entire vetting process that the State Department will engage in because of the limited immunity. And the law is essentially that as you are acting in your role of honorary consul, when you're acting in that position, in that role, you will enjoy this limited civil and criminal immunity during that time that you are acting as this position. I would venture to say that if you had an honorary consul that took advantage of that and was becoming a problem for the State Department or for the country that it is representing, you serve at the pleasure of the country. You're not going to last there very long, and you will be replaced fairly quickly, I would imagine. So my goal is to not test the immunity in my years here, and I think that would be the more appropriate way. Although it comes with a limited immunity, it must be respected nonetheless.
Thank you. Sounds like we must exercise common sense at all times. Well, Damien, I have a question for you. You know, of course, all of you as honorary consuls have to communicate with the governments you represent. And of course, Andrew gave a really good perspective there about, you know, the frank conversations. But can you tell us in terms of process, how often, in your case, do you have to run everything by the French consulate? For instance, I guess you report to the French consulate in Houston. What is the process involved, you know, for the rest of us? How does that work?
Well, it's probably a weekly process, you know, in general, as to coordinate what's going on in the world or what's going on in the news. And basically the vibe of the city of San Antonio or the people of city of San Antonio to the consulate, which I assume then turns around and forwards to the embassy or even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I guess, in Paris. It kind of goes both ways. Yes, they ask us for the blunt feel, and during, you know, elections, I think it's especially, you know, during the last elections, They wanted to know the real feeling of the city of San Antonio, for example. I mean, I've met some reporters that were here in town, some French reporters that were here in town, checking on the pulse of voters in a city, international city like San Antonio. So I think I think that's the main artery right there. And after that, for the communications, we communicate for the local community, French community, which has questions or comments, feed it to us directly as Honorary Consul, and then we pass it on also to the Consul General for them to assess. And so I mean, there's a lot of repartie there that goes between both places, because people look up on the internet consul, consulate, French, San Antonio, and poof, I get a phone call or an email about all kinds of things. I mean, there may be just related to travel or visas, but really all kinds of things. So yes, we then, I guess, assess part of it, whether it's a question that we need to forward through, and then we pass it on and hopefully make a connection with the people in need and the consulate.
Of course, in the business that you're in, with the restaurant business, your hours tend to kind of go into the evening and morning, and so I'm imagining you juggling those responsibilities between both. And you recently had the ambassador of France in San Antonio, didn't you?
Correct. So we had a visit from the ambassador of France for the inauguration of a large sous vide factory that opened in the Brooks neighborhood over here in South San Antonio, the Brooks Air Base. And yeah, it was very inciting and very exciting for a Frenchman in the food business to participate in the creation of a food factory in San Antonio. I think it's probably one of the largest companies in the world for sous vide food products.
Thank you. Now, I've been observing, watching the chat. We don't really have many questions, so I'm going to take a personal privilege, because we have the time. And I'm going to say, I'm going to ask you in 30 seconds, each one of you, to give me your high-level elevator pitch promoting the country you represent. So what would you say to someone when you're trying to talk them up about the country you're representing? What would you tell them? So 30 seconds. Does anyone want to go first?
Well, I'll go, I guess, since I was already on. I mean, for France, it's of course it's pride from especially the business that I'm in and the culture of food. So I'm here to promote it to anyone and anyone and anybody that is willing to try new things and and even to the people that don't even know what is French food. But then beyond that, of course, there's the wine too. Like I think it was Marco noticing my cup over here. It's water though, but wine will come later when you come by. Anyway, I think it's there's a big culture of food and wine in France, as of course luxury products and a number of other things, but which in my business I'm very proud of. So that would be the key aspect that I want to promote.
Great, thank you. Marco?
Yeah, I would say the south of Chile is one of the most amazing. I was in Denver and Colorado this week, and it reminded me so much of Chile, the mountains, the lakes, the river, the tunnels. Breckenridge reminding me so much. So traveling in the south of Chile really is just a fantastic place. By the way, I was in my annual physical this year in May during my birthday. I always do an annual physical. And my two doctors there always say, hey, you're looking great, and we wanted to talk to you. I think we want to retire in Chile. So they asked me to research places in the south of Chile all the way to Punta Arenas, which is very, very cold. And that's where they want to move in retirement. So there's more and more people retiring in the south of Chile because of the climate.
Thank you. Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I would say quickly that travel to Africa is a trip of a lifetime. And everyone should try and travel to Africa at least once. I've been fortunate to have been a number of times now, but Namibia is a gateway to South Africa. You have an opportunity to see wildlife. If you're a hunter, you have some of the best hunting opportunities for plains game, Cape buffalo, crocodile, leopard, a variety of species. And the US dollar is strong. The dollar right now is around 14 Rand to a dollar. Used to be 7.5 a few years ago. So it's a great time to travel.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, you know, Spain has such a natural connection to our city. 1731, we see the first essential civil government put together by the Canary Islanders that traveled here. So we have a natural connection of hundreds of years that put the footprint here. I would brag that we have a very nice Plaza de San Antonio in the Canary Islands that sits there for everyone to see. Spain has a tremendous opportunity, both from education, culture, cuisine, ambiance, living a lifestyle that is second to none. I would encourage everybody to, you get to look at the history and then see the path forward. And I would encourage it through the eyes of a Spaniard. It's a great ride.
Thank you. And finally, Andrew.
Well, first of all, let me say that the UK and the US share so much historically. We share the same values. We are each other's closest allies politically. We both believe in liberal democracy, and we have common approach to diplomacy. So all of that is one side of it. I think from the other side, from finance, we are each other's largest investors. We are the biggest investor in the US, and the US is the largest investor in the UK economy. But we also share a tremendous amount in terms of our culture and not just the language. I think Churchill said we were two peoples divided by a common language, but the cultural connections are enormous. It's not just Shakespeare and the Beatles and James Bond anymore. It's all sorts of modern things that are creeping up, where people won't realize an actor is a British actor or vice versa. And the sheer beauty of the north of Scotland has to be seen to be believed. So a little but I mean, I would encourage everyone not just to look at any of our countries individually, but to look at the idea of being more international generally as just a wonderful thing to expand your horizon. So I'm wearing a French tie here. One of my daughters did her master's degree in Madrid. So I welcome anything that helps expand people's horizons and encourages them to travel and see what's there outside Texas.
Well, thank you. That's a great note to finish on. And I wanted to express my appreciation to each and every one of you. It's been an honor to moderate this panel with you and spend this afternoon having a conversation. And I would like to thank you and thank our audience. And Armin, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you, Sherry. What an extraordinary panel. We've been getting a lot of, if you want to take your time, honorary consuls, look in the chat room. You're getting a lot of love there, so that's good to hear. We had a couple more questions we couldn't get to, but thank you all for tuning in and for supporting the council. Of course, we can't do this without your support for being members or donating. Our website's going to be available in the link. We have a special book club program next week. It's a border crossings panel. We have 4 authors, John J.J. Casey, Joyce Yarrow, Keith Madsen, and Hans Trujillo. And it's moderated by our very own Samantha Scory, June 29th. Our programming in person in July, the only hint we will give you is from Texas to Tokyo. And I know Ms. Costello's ears perked when I said that, but keep in tune for that. Thank you to Sherry. Thank you to the honorary consuls for making time for us. and also the City of San Antonio Global Engagement Office and Passport San Antonio for your support and sponsorship. What a great segment. If we can replicate this in person, we need to get it on the calendar for 2022 so we can enjoy that scotch that Andrew Dunn-Russell was. Oh, there we go. Nostrovia.
Blanja.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate you. Thank you for your support. You all have a great evening.